up this season. We are glad you could all make it out for this virtual academy session. Before we begin, kindly mute your microphones while present in this room. If you're stuck amongst others, hold the letter G to move to the crowd. Please maintain the decorum of the hall. As our speaker will be presenting via Zoom, you can view his presentation via the video thumbnail on the bottom right of your screen. Double-click the thumbnail for a full view. To submit questions during the live Q&A session, kindly locate the green board on the top or bottom of the room. Click on the letter X and fill out the form. Our speaker today is Vishal Verma of Aether Energy. Vishal comes with more than 12 years of rich experience in hardware design. He has been with Aether for more than 3 years. Currently, he is the hardware design engineer, a design lead in power electronics. He is responsible for the design and development of battery management system hardware for Aether 450 and 450X. He has also contributed to the hardware development of public and private charging infrastructure of Aether 450. So, without further ado, please welcome Vishal Verma. Vishal, please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My name is Vishal, and in this session, I will be taking you through the avenues of power conversion in electric vehicle systems. Before we begin, I'll quickly talk about Aether. Aether is an energy company founded by Tarun Mehta and Swapnil Jain in an incubation in IIT Madras in 2013. This startup was funded by Hero MotoCorp, Tiger Global, Sachin and Binny Bansal, founders of Flipkart, with a total funding of $141.2 million. Currently, we are a workforce of 1,000+ employees who are working on building fast and intelligent electric scooter and EV charging network. Uh, we are present in 10 cities as of now and are gearing up to expand to 20+ cities in a year time. Uh, on the engineering deck, we have an IP portfolio with 44 Indian patents, patent applications, 115 design registrations, 109 trademarks, and 10 granted patents. Our portfolio includes 450 and 450X as a range of high performance electric scooter, which are designed and developed at Aether, based out in Bangalore. Uh, these products are seamless, have seamless functionality and tightly integrated into uh, hardware and software systems. The performance of an Aether 450X uh, is typically it gives out 3.3 seconds for a 0 to 40 kilometer per hour pickup with a true range of 85 kilometers and a top speed of 80 kilometer per hour. A 7-inch touchscreen dashboard offers 4G connectivity and Bluetooth connectivity with an onboard navigation, a park assist functionality, and for continuous improvement being done at the engineering centers in Aether. We push the updates and new features onto the vehicle through over the air upgrades. So in this presentation on the power conversion avenue in electric vehicles, uh, in, I'll be presenting a lot of academic content pertaining to power electronic theory. A lot of it may be related to your coursework that some of you would have already been through, and some of you would be studying in future semesters. But the intent of this presentation is to give you a flavor of the role power electronics plays that we study in an engineering coursework, and what that role plays, what that uh, how that works out in practice related to design and development of electric vehicles. Right. So I'll be covering the content of this presentation is going to be, I'll be taking you through a basic architecture of an electric vehicle. And then talking about the internals of the power conversion systems of the architecture, talking about the auxiliary power supply, then the charger, its constituents, PFC, and the DC-DC isolated converter, motor controller drive, types of motors that we use, control mechanisms, and then I will briefly touching upon how, as a student, one can start to explore this possibility of getting into a EV design and development from a power electronics perspective. And then I'll take up, and further to that, I'll be taking up question and answers. Uh, I would request all of you to fill in your Q&A in the form that has been provided, so that I can take it up at the end. We'll quickly start with the architecture. Typical or general EV architecture involves at the core a three-phase inverter circuit, which is controlled by electronic controller, which takes in input from brakes and accelerator to convert it into an electrical power signal that drives a three-phase, typically a three-phase motor, which translates that electrical power into mechanical, passing through a mechanical transmission onto the wheel for traction. The power to electrical inverter is provided by the battery pack, which is at the core of an electric and the most talked about subject on an electric vehicle. Uh, this battery pack gets its power through energy refueling circuit from an energy source, and also this battery pack supplies power to the peripheral systems using an auxiliary power supply. Peripheral, it can include lights, horns. In case of a four-wheeler, it can be a steering control unit, a temperature control unit, etc. Right. Moving into a little more details of the and the specifics of the electrical portion of it. I'll emphasize on this slide where we'll talk about these specific modules where a battery comprising of cell packs and a battery management system, where this battery management system is responsible for monitoring and control of power coming in and out of the battery pack by monitoring its voltage, current, temperature, and even humidity of the battery pack. It offers balancing of the cells in order to get maximum output out of the battery pack and maximum life, in fact. Uh, the user provides input to the electric vehicle through a throttle as a feedback, as an input of the vehicle speed, which in turn reaches the motor controller either directly or through a vehicle control unit, vehicle control unit, which is typically a PMSM or a BLDC motor with its drive controller lately, and this throttle input gets converted into the relevant torque and speed control of the motor, right, in order to get traction. The auxiliary power supply here now, because battery pack itself is not a fixed supply of the voltage. Based on the state of charge, the variation of the voltage happens at the terminals of the battery pack. So the auxiliary power supply converts this varying DC output voltage to a regulated DC for powering on the vehicle electronics. Because these electronics, for example, the vehicle control unit, the data aggregator, or the vehicle Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Sorry about that.
All right. So the vehicle control unit is at the heart of processing the state and the inputs coming to the vehicle and driving the the relevant units in order to give a steady and smooth experience of the vehicle. It also provides user interface such as maybe a screen display or a key input in order to turn on and off the lights or etc. Along with peripherals such as lights or horn. So all these modules or the peripherals needs to be powered up using the auxiliary power supply. In order to charge up the vehicle, the AC mains typically, say for example, in India, the 230 volt AC mains is converted into CCCV charging of a battery pack using this AC to DC converter. AC to DC converter, yeah. So I will, in subsequent slide, I will be talking briefly about individual blocks in this, especially the 3 blocks in boards, which are which are packed with power electronics and are the major power conversion modules of a battery of an electric vehicle. So starting with auxiliary power supply, this, as I discussed, this is used in converting the varying DC voltage of the battery into a regulated peripheral bus voltage. This auxiliary power supply can be both in an isolated topology or in a non-isolated topology. It depends on what kind of configuration you are looking for and at the architectural level of the vehicle. Now, since this module is responsible for powering up the peripherals, now it depends on what kind of peripherals and how many peripherals and what is the total power budget of those peripherals is, which defines the typical power rating of the auxiliary power supply. Which you can have a typical rating of the power supply can be a 10 watt to 100 watt system based on the power supply as well as on the characteristics such as isolated or non-isolated. There are four typically used topologies. In a non-isolated type, you have a buck and a boost converter. Buck takes in a high voltage and converts it into a low voltage. Say, for example, a 48 volt battery system and a 12 volt output for the peripherals. We can employ a buck converter. A boost converter will be boosting the voltage for a low voltage battery, converting into a higher voltage system for driving the peripherals. Can utilize boost converter, but most likely a typical EV system would employ stepping down the voltage from a higher to a lower voltage. Yeah. We'll quickly go into a little details of how buck converter and a boost converter looks like. So a buck converter in its crude electrical form have a switch, inductor, and output load capacitance with a freewheeling diode here. When it operates during the operation, when the switch T turns on, the inductor takes up the energy from the source Vin and passes on to the output load. And during the off state of the switch, the inductor provides the energy stored into it to the load and freewheels through the diode D. But during this during the off state, when the diode is conducting, there is a power loss through it, right? And in order to improve on the efficiency of the system, a different topology within the buck converter is utilized, which is called as a synchronous buck, where the diode D can be replaced by a switch here, a MOSFET Q2, and the switch Q1 and Q2 works in complementary fashion, where when Q1 turns on, Q2 remains off, and the overall functionality remains same. The advantage that we get here is during the off cycle of Q1, when the current is supposed to be flowing through Q2, the channel on Q1 offers the path of least resistance and offers minimal power dissipation, and so it offers a much higher efficiency as compared to asynchronous buck converter. In similar lines, in a boost converter, the topology is similar, but in a complementary fashion, where during the on state of the MOSFET or the switch T, the inductor gets energized, and the moment switch T turns off, the energy is transferred onto the output, which has an added voltage of V in on top of the inductor voltage. So you get a voltage at the output which is higher than the input voltage, and that's why it offers a boost action, and so called a boost converter. In the off state of the MOSFET T, diode D is in the conductive mode, and it leads to power dissipation due to its forward voltage drop. So similar to a synchronous buck converter, when you replace diode D with MOSFET M3, we can use MOSFET M2 and M3 in a complementary fashion, and which offers lower power dissipation and eventually a better efficiency numbers. So looking at these parameters, buck converter, boost converter can give efficiency numbers of around 90 to 95%. In terms of implementation, these are typical. These are low on cost as compared to the other three, and low on complexity in terms of realizing the design into practice. When you talk about isolated converters, typically used converters are flyback and resonant LLC. Flyback converter offers low efficiency due to its inherent losses on the magnetically coupled inductors during the off state, which gets eventually dissipated onto the snubber circuitry. Although the implementation is low on cost, but it has got some medium complexity in terms of controlling in defining and designing the control loop. Flyback converters are, because they are low cost, these and also low efficiency, these are typically used for applications where the power requirement are of the order of 10 to 20 watts or around there. And whereas in case of a higher power system, such as maybe a 100-watt system, the power dissipation due to the inefficient working of flyback can be so high that it may lead to a lot of heating problems. So resonant LLC converters are utilized, which offer efficiencies as high as 98 to 99%. But the only problem is they have a high cost of components, and their complexity of control is high. But the cost is not the cost of the realization of the circuit does not define which topology to use. The efficiency is a very important factor. Why high efficiency? Because not only it offers system efficiency, high system efficiency, which is lesser wastage of electric power, which leads to better range, but also it reduces the overall system cost, the system cost realization, right? Due to simple thermal management, as 98% or 98% of a 100-watt system, for example, will only lead to 2-watt dissipation, which is easy to manage and handle. Maybe just with a convection cooling, it can be managed. Whereas a 10 to 15-watt of power in a flyback would be difficult to manage. And here we are talking about low power systems because it's an application of an auxiliary power supply, right? When we talk about high voltage systems, then it's a different ball game where I will come to. Next important module on an electric vehicle is the charger. The main function of charger is to convert grid AC mains to a CCCV, constant current, constant voltage charging of the battery pack. Typical specifications are like of the order of 200 watts based on a small battery pack sizing to more than 2 kilowatt systems for a higher capacity battery pack, and it also depends on the voltage of the battery pack. Charger constitutes 5 stages or 5 different blocks by and large. First is the input from the AC main passes through a input filtering circuit, which the function of this circuit is to protect from harmful external transient voltages such as surge or electrical fast transients or ESD, and reduces the emissions from the system due to high frequency switching and high power switching, right? Which could pass on to the grid and may cause compliance issues. Next stage is the rectification stage, where this AC is converted into a pulsating DC, where the AC to DC conversion takes place, and usually for a system of the order of 200 to 2 kilowatt level, these are usually a PFC stage, where which is the power factor correction stage. Next, the output of this stage goes to a power conversion, main power conversion stage, which is a DC to DC converter. I'll be talking about more on PFC and DC-DC in the subsequent slides. The output of this DC goes to the output filter, which removes the ripples due to the switching action happening on the power stage, and also reduces the emissions going on to the first the input lines and also to the output load. All these sections are controlled using PWM by a controller. This controller takes inputs, feedbacks from the output stage as well as the input stage, and also offers communication with other modules, and eventually controls the power rectification, maybe the PFC stage or the power conversion stage. This controller could be realized as a single controller or can be multiple controllers based on the architecture that a person or the product asks for. Now I will talk about the PFC module. Here, PFC refers to as the power factor correction. The main function of PFC is to minimize the amount of reactive power produced during the rectification process of AC input, and provides a power factor close to unity. So power factor is the angle is the vector angle between the voltage and the current at the input on the grid line, and the idea is to bring it as close as possible to unity. It also improves total harmonic distortion of the input AC, which is very important for complying for compliance with the grid. Typically, there are 3 topologies that are employed in a PFC based on their efficiency and the power range. A classic boost topology, where it is utilized for 100 watt to 4 kilowatt systems. A dual boost bridgeless system, which offers a higher efficiency as compared to classic boost, but is a little high on the cost as compared to classic boost. And then is a totem pole bridgeless, which offers zero voltage switching, leading to a very high efficiency system of the order of 98 to 99.5% efficiency. And so it is employed in a 1 to 5 kilowatt systems. We'll quickly look at how these topologies are realized into a circuit. A classic boost has got a bridge input, and to the output of this boost is output of this bridge is a typical boost converter topology that we have seen in our previous section. The duty cycle of this switch is modulated in such a way that the current at the input is following the voltage, which in turn keeps the capacitor C0 energized and filled up with charge, so that it transmits or transfers power to the next stage. In a dual bridgeless power factor correction system, it is similar to classical boost, but it uses dual inductor, and it uses the copy of the same topology into two, realized using 2 inductors and 2 switches. And for one half of the cycle, one pair of inductor and switch works in to do power factor correction, and in the negative half of the cycle, the other couple does the same functionality. The advantage that we get is the efficiency remains the same, but the power dissipated now is spread into more than two components. So now earlier it was divided into inductor and one MOSFET. Here it will be divided among four components. So you get a better thermal performance due to bridgeless PFC, but this due to more components, it will be realized by a higher cost. An advancement to this is a totem pole bridge PFC, where instead of using a separate boost topology, the boost itself is a part of the bridge uh, of the full bridge converter, where the inductor at the input and the high and low side MOSFET here. So during a positive cycle, the way it works is the switch S1 and inductor L1 will form the boost converter topology and will fill up the capacitor CO. Whereas in the negative half of the AC sinusoidal, S2 and D1 will be working in congruence to give out the power factor corrected output at the capacitor C0. So we have already discussed about the characteristics of this. All right. Now the most important section of a charger is the isolated DC to DC converter. Once the pulsating AC or the AC is converted into a pulsating voltage using a PFC controller, the next stage is to convert that into a DC voltage which is utilized by the loads. In our case, it is the battery which will be getting charged in a CC to CV loops. In order to keep, because it operates at 220 volt AC, safety is a prime importance. So these topologies are typically isolated topologies, and very less often are these topologies non-isolated. So when talking about the isolated DC to DC converter, there are 6 topologies which are utilized and are in trend based on different power range. So a flyback converter, as we discussed, is helpful and useful only for a low power system. Now we are talking about 200 watt system. The reason is now the voltages are very high. The switching current is going to be less as compared to what it was on a low voltage system for almost the same power. So it offers a bigger margin on the power conversion. So as compared to the auxiliary power supply system. So the flyback converter offers a power range of less than 200 watts with a typical efficiency of 85 to 90%. It's a low cost system and lower complexity of realization as compared to the one on the list right now. And then there is a forward converter. So the flyback converter and the forward converter forms the asymmetric type of isolated DC-DC converter, where they utilize one switch or an odd number of switch for switching the input current for power conversion. Whereas the push-pull, half-bridge, full-bridge, and resonant LLC, these are also categorized as symmetric power converters, and these are typically used for higher voltage, higher power systems because of their inherent property of higher efficiency. I'll just quickly touch upon some of the topologies that are very frequently used. We'll just talk about, say, a flyback converter here. The primary side inductor of the coupled inductors is switched with switch S1. During the turn on of MOSFET or the switch on of the circuit, primary of the inductor energizes the core, and during the turn off time, the energy in the core is transferred to secondary circuit via diode D and into the capacitor C and to the load R. During off circuit, the leakage inductance in the primary stores some energy, and this energy gets dissipated as heat on the snubber circuit, which leads to lower efficiency numbers. Similar is the case in a forward converter. In a push-pull converter, this is a symmetric converter where a center taping is used for switching the two ends of the primary, and the output from the two ends of the secondary is used during individual switching of the S1 and S2 switch. So say an S1 turns on and the output through D1 powers like forwards the power or pushes the power into the output capacitor, while when S2 is on, the power will be transferred from the NP1 to NS1 via D3 into the output capacitor. So this is a typical functioning of how a push-pull inverter works. Slight modification of this is a full bridge converter. The problem with push-pull is that it is very bulky because of a huge magnetic component. The inductor or the transformer used here is huge and is not efficiently used because at one point of time only one part of the transformer is utilized for transferring the power. So a modification of this topology is a full bridge converter where the primary is switched using a full bridge circuit, and also a half bridge topology where one end of the transformer is connected with a voltage divider using the capacitor network, and the other leg is switched using the switches, typically MOSFETs or IGBTs. The resonant LLC converter is a type of, it is offered in terms of both half bridge and full bridge topologies. The way it works, so full bridge and half bridge topologies as a hard switching topologies are fixed frequency topologies and work at varying duty cycle, whereas a resonant LLC is a fixed duty cycle but varying frequency topology, where the capacitor in the primary of the induct of the transformer forms a tuned circuit, and the operation of the switching at the primary is maintained at the resonance of this equivalent circuit in the primary, so that maximum power is transferred into secondary with minimum power losses. If you look at the numbers of efficiency, resonant LLC converter offers efficiency as high as 98%. Full bridge offers 90 to 95, and half bridging also is at 90 to 95% efficiency. Resonant LLC, however, is high on implementation cost and high on complexity. But as we discussed, high cost of the parts does not mean high cost of the overall system. Now we'll talk about. So this was the overall topic about the charger. Now we'll talk about the next most important section of an electric vehicle, which is the electric motor. Typically, lately, 5 types of electric motors are used for an EV application. A DC series motor, which is a brushed commutation, a permanent magnet stator with a brushed commutator rotor with a DC motor control, is also called as a DC series motor, which this is very old school technology, and is still prevalent in the industry. Reason being it has it's very easy on speed control and offers very high sudden load bearing, like a transient load bearing capacity at the shaft. But it is high in maintenance and does not offer any torque control, and so it is low on efficiency. The answer to the problems of a DC series motor is a brushed DC motor, which uses a permanent magnet rotor and an electronic commutation of the stator winding is stator winding helps improve the efficiency as high as 95 to 98%, and it also offers a very high starting torque and also a very high power density. It uses a BLDC motor control, which is typically a trapezoidal motor control algorithm. The only problem with a BLDC control, BLDC motor is a high torque ripple. So because it does not offer torque control, and so it has very high torque ripple, and is also noisy. So a different mechanism on BLDC control is utilized uh, to call it a permanent magnet synchronous motor. In construction, it is similar to a BLDC motor, but the control mechanism is different. Here it utilizes a sinusoidal control mechanism, which makes it high on efficiency and high on starting torque, but also provides better torque control, and because of which the torque ripples are eliminated, because now the coils are running on a sinusoidal waveforms and not on a trapezoidal waveform. So the torque control is very smooth, but it has a disadvantage of being a complex drive system, and, because it needs a lot more computation and control, which leads to overall high cost of the system. Lately, PMSM is industry-wide trying to replace the three-phase induction motors, even in industrial settings. Industrial induction motors also have AC control, but they have very long life and less maintenance. But the problem is a low starting torque, and it needs a very difficult and very complex control mechanism uh, for maintaining the torque and the speed. Uh, Now, the problems with BLDC and PMSM is a permanent magnet being used, which is a rare earth element and very costly, very rarely available, and where it is available, it is putting a lot of cost pressures on the overall system realization. So, an answer to that is the switch reluctance motor. It typically works on a same principle as how electromagnet would stick a nail when given a DC supply to it, where the path of minimum reluctance tries to align with the field in the stator winding in the stator winding, and so the least reluctance path is realized using a laminated steel rotor, and it also uses a AC motor control. The most important advantage of this is it is low cost because no magnets are required. It offers high acceleration, and due to less rotor inertia, as the rotor is no more a heavy magnet, but a laminated steel rotor. It offers high power density. It is easier to cool because the only heating element now is the stator winding, which can be very easy to cool from the casing of the motor. Uh, the problems associated with switch reluctance motors right now is it is complex control, and there are certain noise issues on the control while controlling or while the working of the during the working of the motor. Next, we'll talk about some motor control mechanisms. Okay, so as we were discussing, uh, motor controller takes a DC voltage input from the battery pack. Say in case of a electric vehicle system, DC input from a battery pack, and it gets feedback from the of various parameters from the motor in terms of position of the rotor, its speed, the temperature of the coils and the rotors, and also the coil current through various sensors deployed inside the motor. Based on those inputs and the input from the user as to what the set point has to be, it manipulates or modulates the output voltage and current of the voltage and current of the coil in order to control the overall speed, torque, direction, the power output, as well as the health. So health can be controlled or monitored. So temperature is one of the important factors that can help in increasing or keeping a check on the health of the motor, and even prolonging the overall life of the motor. Now we'll talk about control mechanisms. So there are different control algorithms that are employed for motor controls. So when we're talking about DC motor control for a series DC motor, and BLDC motor control for a BLDC motor, whereas AC motor control for the other three motor types, a PWM chopper type control algorithm, which is very low on computation, uses single PI loop, is typically utilized for a DC motor control for driving a DC series DC motor, whereas a voltage frequency control, a VFD type dual loop computational algorithm, is utilized for a single phase or a three-phase AC motor. In case of BLDC motor, trapezoidal drive control is used. In this, the way it works is it turns on the commutation across two windings at a time, leaving the third one in the open in the floating condition, causing a trapezoidal type waveform of current through the coil. And so it is called a trapezoidal control. It also uses dual PI loop, not too high or not too heavy on computation, so easily realizable. Then comes the sinusoidal drive control, which is typically utilized on BLDC as well as AC motor control for a better torque control and smooth torque control and less transients on the output torque. This utilizes dual loop, but is a little heavy on computation, so needs some high-end processing power there. A new technology on control algorithms is the vector control, lately also known as a field-oriented control, or FOC. This control mechanism utilizes Park's transformation in order to directly compute or map the torque vectors and the field vectors of the motors in terms of currents through the coil windings. This offers very efficient drive control and offers very smooth torque control. It is very high on computing, but due to reduced cost for computing power lately in microcontroller, FPGA, and ASIC technologies, FOC or vector control is gripping commercial viability lately, and so is in hot trends on BMDC and especially on PMSM motors. Now we have talked a lot about the theories and the trends and what's going on in the industries and in power electronics in the market. But one important question is for a student who is very new to this, is how to get started into and get into power electronics design, right? The most important part of getting into any practical field is to start with theory, right? So first thing first is to get clarity on the concepts and the theories by say, for example, for electronics, understanding the devices and characteristics in details. For MOSFET, what are the different parameters, what are the different selection criterias, what are the different parasitics, advantages, disadvantages of a MOSFET, or different MOSFETs, or different varieties of switches or other semiconductor components. Understanding those in details, then understanding power topologies. So a brief touch up of what I have already discussed in this presentation is something that needs to be dug deeper into. and understanding control theory, because all the power uh, conversion system are very deep in control theory, needs a very deep understanding in control theory. uh, Once the theory and the concepts are strong enough or clear enough, one can take up a problem statement, go about doing a design, basic design and calculation, electrical, magnetic, and thermal computation as to what kind of components are required, what values are there, getting all the design calculations in hand, and then utilize simulation tools for doing a open loop simulation. So first thing is to get a hang of simulation tools. You can use tools like PSpice, MATLAB, or NTSpice for basic circuit simulation. Then modeling these components selected into the design and calculation into the simulation tool, running those simulation and analyzing electrical and thermal aspect of the design. So right now we are only talking about calculation and simulation. We are still not got um, into the actual prototyping of the board, right? Uh, the idea is to get as much information as possible uh, before we go about spending money and spending time on getting the prototypes done. Uh, this helps in also strengthening the understanding on design and calculation. So analyzing all those aspects in an open loop simulation of that power topology, and then going for understanding the control mechanics by using data sheets of the controller available. So you maybe take a typical topology and say a buck converter topology, get the IC that you would like to use, go into data sheet and see how does that IC work, what are their block diagrams, and then try to model that into a SPICE tool. So now when you are doing a open loop simulation until now you can make uh, a closed loop simulation by modeling that controller algorithm into a SPICE tool, not maybe using a behavioral models also, right? And modeling them and then running a closed loop simulation, get all the parameters and data out of that, and then once satisfied with that, go about understanding the PCB design requirement. For example, functional requirements, so the functionality part of it, the safety requirements, for example, the isolation requirement, and EMI/EMC requirement, for example, the compliance requirement. So EMI/EMC means electromagnetic immunity and electromagnetic compatibility. With immunity, it means that the system is immune to external electromagnetic noise and does not misbehave or malfunction. If, say, for example, a phone coming closer to your system should not lead to your output voltage fluctuating, right? That's its immunity characteristic. Whereas the compliance part talks about it should not be disturbing other systems running in its periphery or in its nearby environment. So the system needs to be compliant with other systems and designs which are typically governed by different international and national standards. After understanding of this aspect, maybe for a new buy, EMI/EMC might not be of very strict importance at this point of time, but functional and safety is something that has to be taken care of. Then go about design PCB, validate the design calculation, validate all the design calculations done over here and the simulations that have been run to see what are the misses, what are the gaps between what was simulated and calculated versus what is realized on the PCB. Use this feedback and improvise your design calculation and models and do a iteration in order to improvise on the design. So as these iterations happen, automatically the understanding of how to implement and what all factors to be taken care of automatically gets improvised, and a good clarity comes in. Now the question is, why are we talking about so many theories? These things may not be directly applicable today for a Formula Bharat, right? But for a student in initial year of engineering and in competition, this is something that can be utilized. This will help in strengthening the theory and engineering design for the vehicle, right? Say for a short term, when you're talking about Formula Bharat, these things can help you build strong fundamentals of the system design, which will help in a much more predictable execution of the Formula Bharat project, right? The project on the competition. Then this and all these things can happen when you have a strong understanding of how these things are realized, by which will happen by like better selection of the components, rather than relying on online reviews about say a motor controller selection, right? Going like fundamentally understanding what the characteristics of the motor controller are talking about, and should we be buying it or not, should we be using that in our system, or how tunable are they for our application. So understanding those aspects will only come when you have a solid understanding of things. This forecasting your cost, right? You need not spend too much or iteratively spend because you have selected some wrong component, and now you cannot like replace it with a better component, you end up buying another one. Also while the design is is in place, and now there are certain issues or problems, and uh, and it's taking a lot of time to debug. So the knowledge of fundamentals will always help in closing these loops quicker and faster. In a long term, as a student, it will help in and then defining a career path of interest. Like in the initial year of engineering, only you will be able to pick up what you want to do, say 3 or 4 years down the line. And then theory with practical application will help in I think, a great quick start of a professional career for a student pursuing power electronics. With that said, I think I'll be open for question and answers. Uh, Let me
Hi,
just.
Vishal. So we've sent a few reminders. Right now, there's only one question that came in much earlier, I think before the session even started. So I'm not sure if it's
Correct.
applicable. But it's how grounding of LV battery in an electric formula vehicle can be done. Um,
So, okay, let me answer this question. So this is not a very direct. This does not have a very direct answer. It
yeah.
depends a lot on how this. I think this is Amia who is asking this question, right? So Amia,
Correct.
it depends a lot on what you are designing. How is the vehicle architecture defined? Uh, but say for a low voltage system, it would be good if we keep the grounding of say a battery pack, for example, uh, have a DC decoupled system. So what I mean by DC decoupled is, say for example, the battery positive and battery negative terminals are not coupled are not DC coupled with the or are not directly connected to the system. Because say for example, if the negative of the battery pack, for example, is connected, right, to the chassis, so there is only one point failure for shorting the battery pack. So a battery positive, due to maybe a spanner touching between the battery positive and the chassis, can lead to a short circuit of the battery pack. So this becomes a safety hazard. So it is always beneficial to keep the grounding isolated from both the terminals and for overall system. But for controlling the common mode noise and common mode currents running on the system, because the whole system is a switching converter, right? You talk about charger, you talk about controller, you talk about auxiliary supply, all are switching at very high frequency. So there are transient noises that these systems are going to emit, and so it becomes very important to take to give them closed loop paths. So typically the AC the systems are AC coupled using safety capacitors. A typical Y cap or a XY cap can be utilized in order to connect between your battery negative and battery positive to the chassis, which will these safety capacitors have unique functionality that they, in case of over voltage or in case of a failure, they don't end up into short circuit, they always open up, which is the reason why they are called safety capacitor. So this is one way of doing it. There are multiple ways, but it all depends on how the architecture is. But for say this system, yeah, you can utilize one of such methods. Second question is from Vashish.
Yes,
Okay,
please
see,
suggest
yeah,
some book. Oh,
correct.
yeah.
See, the best book is the course book, I would say, and there is enormous amount of content available online. Go to manufacturers, say go to TI ka website, go to Infineon website, go to semiconductor component manufacturers. They have so much content talking about how to implement, what are the factors that you need to take care. The application notes are the best guides for taking theory into practical, right? So go out researching papers, but the the kind of exposure that you will get reading through practical implementation of the circuits, of the actual manufacturers of the devices, will give you a completely different perspective. To start with, go about using your course book, understand the basic, the fundamentals, and just follow the method that I have talked about, right? Just follow this these stages one by one, and I think you would be on your feet. Uh,
The next
Nelson
question is,
is was
what
the
is
need
the
for
need of
gearbox
a
in.
gearbox in an EV powertrain? Also, is a gear shifter required for an EV?
So what happens, Nelson, is it depends on the kind of traction you are looking at and the kind of motor that you are looking. So when you look at speed versus torque graph of a motor, there are different zones. There are certain zones in which the motor is going to offer you very good efficiency. Say at a particular speed and at a particular torque level, you will be getting a very good efficiency. But say at very low RPMs or at very high RPMs, you may not see very good efficiency offered by the motor. So even in such a scenarios, gearbox comes important, where you convert those torques and speeds into a different with a different gear ratio to come up to an operating point where the motor in itself is efficient, and you are able to get the output at which motor by itself would have been inefficient, right? So there you can actually utilize the gearbox. Gear shifters are again, so within a particular RPM range, it's similar to how an internal combustion engine work. Within a particular RPM range, the engines are most efficient. Similarly, is the case in case of motors. Within a particular RPM and torque range, the electric motors are efficient. In order to get something beyond that on a vehicle, maybe the power is sufficient, but the RPM and the torques are different. So in order to translate those into what you want on the traction, uh, maybe a gear shifter can be utilized. Okay.
I think that's all the questions that we have in via the Q&A form. Vishal, if you're available after this, you could meet the participants directly at the Great Hall, maybe for like a few minutes. Uh,
Sure. Was it a great hall or is what the was it the
so you can meet them
library?
directly in the Great Hall because there's no session happening in the Great Hall until 6 p.m. So then that
Okay. All
way
right.
it will be better. All the participants are there anyways. I think that would
Sure.
be better. And then later on, if you'd like to move into a private room or another room, you're more than welcome to go ahead and do that.
All right. Uh,
Okay. So to the participants at the on Gather Town, Vishal will join in for a few minutes on the platform in the Great Hall. Vishal, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it, and we thank Aether Energy for this initiative. And we look forward to working with Aether Energy in future initiatives like this as well. See you
Thank you.
on.
Thank you. Pleasure is mine. Thank you everyone for your patient listening,
Yeah,
and see you backstage, and we'll talk it out more.
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.